They whisper of Elric in the candlelit corridors of Carcassonne because, when he passes, the air turns cold, and hearts race in empty rooms. No one remembers seeing him enter. No one sees him leave. He is a specter, an echo in the stone, and tonight you will learn why fear echoes louder than any sword. Elric was not born into darkness. He was forged, piece by brutal piece. Once a blacksmith's son, he knew the heat of the forge, the rhythm of hammer on iron, the promise of creation. He shaped steel with patience and purpose and, till the night his brother Lucian was dragged from their humble workshop, accused of treason. Lucian was bound and paraded before a council of nobles in York. They cried sorcerer, heretic, enemy of the realm. His words of innocence echoed under vaulted ceilings. Then he was silenced beneath the swing of an executioner's axe. Elric tried to act, but what a man can do with bare hands when confronted by organized cruelty. He felt something inside him, fracture an innocent heart split apart. He watched the life drain from his brother's eyes, and he understood the ugly truth. In this fractured world, justice was bartered, law was a weapon, and mercy was optional. In that moment, Elric disappeared. He shed his identity as effortlessly as he shed his grief. He walked into night, leaving behind ash and regret, stepping confidently into a new truth. If justice would not be given, it could be carved out silent, deadly, intentional. Months later, rumors began. A monk seen only at twilight, lingering in cloisters, where death could hide in plain sight. A scholar whose questions about power and mortality were too pointed. A drifter who stepped from shadows into a noble's audience and never spoke, yet forever changed the atmosphere with a single glance. Each whispered death was precise. A judge fell in his chambers, clutching books, as if asking their counsel. Then silence. A merchant collapsed before burning candles, clutching his throat, expression frozen in panic. A captain of the guard fell from the castle walkways, no slip. No, stumbled just the finality of gravity. And then emptiness. Each death carried the same message. This world's rules are fragile. Power is a lie. Murmured justice, and it echoes back as vengeance. In these horrors was method. Each death was a stroke of deliberate artistry, not a tantrum. Death was the canvas. The assassin, the artist. Imagine now, you walk a dim corridor, walls slick with candle smoke. A tapestry rustles behind you. You freeze, but no one's there. Just your breath, heavy in the hush. The camera of your thoughts pans to a distant niche and gone. A cool tap at your shoulder, a flicker of movement. You spin, heart hammering. Nothing. Then the hush returns. That hush is the whisper of Carcassonne stone, shaped by fear. And that fear stands in the shape of Elric, untraceable, perfect, remorselessly human. But Elric wasn't always unfeeling. He carries the weight of Lucian's blood, his grief, his rage, his scars. In every shadow he vanishes into, in every target observed, he recognizes the broken face of his own morality. He trains his senses, the subtlest scraping of boot on marble, the trickle of air as doors shift, the real sound of a breath before it's gone. His weapon is not just steal it, his presence, embodied in absence. And you're not just listening. You are present. You feel your pulse quicken. You feel your skin crawl. That's the power of this story. You become part of it. You know there's no turning back. You will walk these halls until the final echo. If you're feeling that twitch in your spine laying into it, don't look away. If this chills your blood, if it makes you ache with curiosity and dread, there's one thing that brings us closer. Hit that subscribe button. Let this channel carry you deeper into stories that scratch at your soul, that linger after the lights go out. Your click gives us purpose to bring more tales of shadows, of vengeance, of humanity right here, now. Let me ask you this. Which moment hit you hardest? A. The gruesome execution of Lucian. B. The first perfect, silent murder in the marble halls drop. Your answer a or be in the comments below. I'm watching, and I'll be replying. Your voices shape the next chapters of our journey. Stay close now. The world of whispers awaits. They say a blade never lies, that in the split second before it strikes, it tells the truth about its master. Elric knew this better than anyone. To the world, he was a ghost in human form, but to those who trained him, and to those who studied the aftermath of his work, Elric was something else, entirely a craftsman whose tools were forged, not just in fire, but in silence, in ritual, and in rage carefully caged behind calm. After vanishing from Carcassonne, Elric didn't seek out revenge in the way a common man might. He didn't storm gates or challenge his enemies. No, he sought steel not just to wield, but to understand. He walked 4 weeks, alone and hungry, until he reached the black cliffs above the Danube, where a man named Merrick lived in exile, a swordsmith. Yes, but, more than that, a philosopher of death. Marek taught that a weapon is not merely something to kill, with it is an extension of belief. A blade is a prayer, and every swing a question. Who deserves to live? Who decides? In Marek's forge, Elric learned to listen to metal. He learned how the composition of ore changed the pitch of a blade's song. He learned the importance of balance not just in weight, but in consequence. There, under Marek's guidance, he forged his first true dagger, slender, double creation with a blood channel carved so finely it was invisible to the eye. They called it the Widow's Fang, and it became his signature, not because it was brutal, but because it was precise, surgical, perfect. But Elric didn't stop at one blade. His pursuit of mastery led him across the fractured kingdoms of Europe. In the shadowed alleys of Bruges, he trained with curved knives that danced like ribbons, designed to sever arteries in the chaos of a crowd. In the mountains of Andalusia, he learned how to coat obsidian blades with venom extracted from crushed nightshade and hemlock. And in the crypt markets beneath Prague, he bought and disassembled broken swords, examining the mistakes of others, learning from their weight, their fractures, their failings. To Elric, every blade told a story. Not just of those it had killed, but of those who had wielded it. The nicks in the steel, the wear on the hilt, the dried blood crusted near the guard, these were clues. He read them like scripture. A weapon in his hands was a relic, a memory, and a warning. But Elric was not just a collector. He was a perfectionist. He trained under conditions most would consider madness. He would hold his breath underwater and draw, swing, and sheath his blade all without creating a ripple. He would navigate complete darkness by sound alone, slicing, dangling cords suspended from the ceiling. And always, he focused on silence. Because to Elric, a blade that made noise was a blade that failed. He carried multiple knives, each for a different purpose. One for cutting through armor seams, one for the jugular, one for poisoning food, disguised as a dinner utensil. His favorite was a long, slender stiletto hidden in his boot, thin enough to pass through the gaps in a cathedral's stonework, fast enough to leave a body slumped without a sound. There was no poetry in the violence, no glory in the act. Elric understood that every life taken was a thread cut from a tapestry, and each cut left a tear. But he also knew that some threads poisoned the entire weave. And so, when he struck, it was not from hatred but from necessity. He was not an agent of chaos. He was a correction. Among the Brotherhood of the Veiled Dagger, his discipline became legend. While others wielded flamboyant swords and poisoned rings, Elric's method was quiet, focused, and deeply reverent. He would sit with his blade before a mission, eyes closed, fingers tracing the edge as if reading Braille, not sharpening it to it, feeling it, asking it what it needed to do, and accepting the cost. What made him different was not just his tools, but his relationship with them. He never named his weapons. He never spoke to them aloud, but he treated each one like an extension of himself. When a blade chipped, he grieved. When he had to bury one, He did so with quiet ceremony, leaving behind a single candle and a few words in old tongue. You served. You endured. Be still. In time, Elric's reputation grew not as a killer, but as a whisper. Lords feared the silence between breaths. Nobles felt uneasy in empty rooms. They hired food tasters, surrounded themselves with guards, sealed their windows. But it wasn't poison or bows they feared. It was the knowledge that somewhere, in the quiet, a blade existed that had already chosen them, and its master, silent, patient, precise, was drawing near. This was the legacy of Elric's. Blades, not the blood they spilled, but the silence they left behind, a silence that echoed louder than any cry. Long before an arrow could sing, or a bolt could spark across rope and wood, there was stillness, a moment of breath arrested. The world paused in a heartbeat. That moment defined everything. For Elric and Lysandra, assassins shaped by shadow. The world of ranged killing was not battlefield theatrics. It was a silent symphony conducted at a distance. They met in Cordoba, where Lysandra had already carved her reputation. She was an enigma draped in crimson and candlelight, eyes that missed nothing, hands that could load a crossbow bolt mid-stride, feet that vanished as soon as they touched cobblestone. She walked straight into Carcassonne's central keep during winter markets, unnoticed, and then someone would fall. No fanfare, no warning. Death was inked on parchment in her calm detachment. In Lysandra, Elric recognized Quina, a hunter who saw targets as stars in the night, each flame to be extinguished with untouched precision. It was Lysandra who taught him that ranged assassination required more than weaponry. It demanded patience, refined into obsession, discipline measured in breaths and angles, and an emotional stillness steel could mirror. Their classroom was the wind, the forests, the rooftops that bristled like giants' teeth beneath the heavens. Elric remembers their first lesson vividly. He stood perched on a sloped rooftop overlooking a dusty market square in Siena. Lysandra handed him an Italian short bow, lightweight, but lethal, its limbs carved to sing with speed. He felt inexperienced, a blade forger thrust into archer's role. She said nothing. She simply set a clay pigeon on a distant post, nodded, and stepped back. He drew, his fingers trembling. The world seemed to tilt, the target blurred. He exhaled. Time slowed. He released. The arrow struck a shard of clay too high. Frustration welled in him. She didn't say a word, just handed him another arrow. He let it fly, clink fragile victory. He turned, expecting praise. Her lips curved, but not in a smile. Now you feel it, she said. The void before release. That is when your mind races. You must calm it. Breathe with purpose. And so began lessons. Carved into memory. How wind shifted when a falcon passed overhead. How humidity shaped wood and sinew. How the heartbeat of a man walking could ride the breeze to unmask a hidden silhouette. They spent weeks in northern forests, where snow echoed the crisp rasp of bowstring, practicing in sub-zero wind. Lysandra would stand 50 paces away, silent, her figure a dark shape against ice. Elric would draw, not knowing if she was there but trusting presence in his body, sight in his fingers. Their bond hardened in those frozen hours, equal parts respect, rivalry, kinship. Ranged killing required ritual. The sighting of a crossbow taught him mathematics, angle, tension, trajectory. The short bow taught him instincts. The sling taught him humility. Nothing taught accuracy like failure. Against practice dummies, the sling felt primitive. Against a moving target on a slope, it was brutal. They unpacked stones, leather strips, and triggers. The sling was a weapon of common folk, but in skilled hands it became terror incarnate. Lysandra showed him how to load a lead ball so it slipped soundless into pouch folds. She made him wear a blindfold once, forcing him to listen for the shifting musk of rodents beneath leaves. The real lesson, true aim begins in the mind. Amid lessons were missions, minor, necessary, unglorified. a corrupt tax collector in Toulouse, who had seized peasants' wagons, a war profiteer in Venice, funding violence with silken gold. Each assignment approached with methodical care, map the route, track routines, calculate sun glare, predict guard shifts. When they struck, it was always one shot, silent, effective, untraceable. Occasionally, Lysandra took the lead. Other times, Elric's hand was steadier. They alternated, learned from each other, and practiced humility in their shared silence. Their greatest test came beyond the Alps, in the countryside of Provence. A knight commander was overseeing the shipment of arms to insurgents. The mission: remove the man. Simple, impossible. They spent days staking out his camp, cardboard drawings of guards, weather charts, wind diagrams covering parchment tables at night. Lysandra observed a pattern. He walked at dawn to the edge of a shallow stream, boots laced off duty, horse tethered. Elric studied the layout of the guard towers, breezy platforms, daylight angles. The day came. At dawn, Elric stood on the hill edge. Lysandra crouched nearby, loaded crossbow aimed at tower. He knocked the Italian shortbow. Silence pressed in. The commander appeared, ginger-haired, sturdy. Elric drew. No shaking now. He breathed in rhythm with pulsing dawn. The arrow flew. It struck behind the commander's collar, dropping him into the stream, eyes wide. Lysandra did nothing. Her own bolt held in place until the guards reacted. They vanished in seconds, melting into fog. They did not celebrate. They walked away, leaving stillness and unanswered prayers behind. That was the point. No glory. Narrative, just removal. The world tilted back toward balance, but ranged killing exacted its toll. They witnessed a childhood friend fall to disease after battle. They saw peasants killed by fire meant for invaders. They saw pain ripple through those not targeted. Each arrow, each bolt taken carefully, still landed on a living heart. They held each other afterwards in quiet that demanded no words. Elric realized that ranged assassination was not detached. It was deeply intimate. Even from a distance, you felt the tremor of death in your blood. Their bond deepened in those moments. They became more than partners. Lysandra's gaze burned with rational fire. Elric's with mournful clarity. They counseled each other, shared old stories. Elric spoke of Lucian's laugh in their childhood workshop. Lysandra, of a brother lost to religious purge. Each understood the other's grief. The lure of vengeance, balanced by the anchor of precision. Under their tutelage, the Brotherhood of the Veiled Dagger began training others, new recruits, who learned to shoot bones, sling stones, and hide behind rooftops. But Elric and Lysandra remained the masters. They drilled recruits until bows cracked, until eyes blurred, until arrows flew true in every condition imaginable. Each lesson hammered home one truth: distance changes nothing but consequence. Every kill still walks beside the killer. After that mission in Provence, their path diverged for a time. Elric returned to forge his blades anew, believing that every arrow might require a different point of entry. Lysandra traveled to the Scottish Isles to assassinate a clan chieftain who had preyed on trading ships. Their letters were sparse, each reporting in code, each infused with gratitude and confidence. Their partnership, ranged but resilient, became legend in the quiet forge and silent forests. Their reputations intertwined, not as killers in the open, but architects of unseen endings. And though distance separated flesh and arrow, their spirits remained tethered to each shot, each breath before the release. Ranged assassination taught them that death need not be close to be felt. From afar, you hear the last gasp echo through your chest. You know that every target is more than a mission. It is an echo in your own past, an unfinished story. Each kill stitched you tighter to the world you tried to change. Elric would later seek closure by returning to Carcassonne, not as a blacksmith's son, but as the unseen conscience of power. And Lysandra returned, not to reunite, but to drift her work, like Elric's, pulling her between purpose and void. This is the art of silent death from afar, a paradox. Intimate elimination at distance. Deliberate compassion within brutality. Mastery seasoned with regret. It is their truth, and in it, you glimpse the heart of medieval shadowcraft. Precision laced with sorrow. Silence echoing through distances greater than arrows can cover. The deadliest weapon is not the one that kills, it's the one that never leaves a trace. Elric and Lysandra had mastered steel and distance. Now, they would learn to vanish. After that fog-shrouded dawn in Provence, the two returned to Carcassonne, under new identities. Elric took the guise of Brother Kieran, a traveling monk preaching charity and humility. His robes were reversible, worn wool on one side, merchant's cloth on the other. Lysandra transformed into Sister Isolde, turned healer. Walls of humanity concealed them. No blade, no arrow, just woven deception. Their greatest lessons would come not from blades or bows, but from transformation. Elric began his training in disguise and blending. He learned to walk like a man of the cloth's silent, deliberate eyes, cast down but always seeing. Monastery life taught him ritual, routine, and how to slip through silent halls at dusk. But even the best disguise cracked under scrutiny. One night, an inquisitor testing novices tapped every wrist, looking for hidden scars. Elric's palm closed like a steel trap. He recited an extra rosary prayer until the inquisitor moved on. Trust was earned one breath at a time. Disguises extended beyond robes. Elric wore a merchant's belt with hidden compartments for vials of belladonna-laced wine. He carried wooden cups capable of holding liquid evergreen that could dull a guard without killing him. He practiced changing clothes in seconds: hood down, jacket off, bag over the shoulder, becoming Lazarus. A student of mathematics, in less than 8 steps, Lysandra's work focused on distraction. She learned to be the invisible whore, the grieving widow, the drunken soldier, all roles that demanded authenticity. In Venice, she infiltrated a masquerade as a bereaved noblewoman. Her performance was so convincing, the hostess offered sympathy in secrets. While she wept by moonlight, her blade hidden in a fan. She learned that deception was a performance without script. Poison became their silent partner. Elric learned to distill arsenic with peasants from Bruges, mixing it into pigments used for frescoes, just a thumbprint across a noble's face. He found frozen lakes in Bavaria, where wolfsbane grew, and collected its petals at dawn. In the remote apothecary of Florence, he discovered belladonna wine, just a drop in a goblet. Twisted into death, days later, without suspicion. They refined application techniques, dyeing the edges of winnecloth with toxins so no one knew when they drank, carving needles disguised as toothpaste applicators, hidden groove rings that let poison seep into skin contact. Every method was designed for maximum plausibility and minimum trace. The most profound lesson came during a mission in Verona. A corrupt merchant had sold arms to rebel peasants. The plan: poison him at a feast. Lysandra lured the merchant into a private booth, feigning dialect ignorance. As she poured wine, Elric slipped inside a kitchen of shadows, placing a tiny bowl of honeyed mushrooms under the tablecloth. The merchant ate. After a night of mirth, he felt flush, then sick. He stumbled outside, faint, pale, convulsing. Then nothing, no sword, no shot, no plea, just collapse. They watched through masked windows, silent observers. The deed was done, yet nothing would tie back to them. And as dawn broke, the merchant's body was mistaken for cholera, a plague victim. Elric realized this was the apex of invisibility, to kill, not as strangers, but as part of the world's rhythm. Training to vanish required emotional control. In Bruges, they practiced in crowded markets. Elric held a bag of oranges, mingling, until Lysandra, now a basket seller, slipped a dagger into his sleeve. She meant to test him. When a guard approached, he felt the hilt against his ribs and froze. Yet he continued, sold oranges, joked with children, bowed to a priest. He performed calm. Presence folded into quiet until the test passed. They trained. By night, teaching recruits to shadow movement, reading blind corners, measuring footfall echoes. They learned to communicate without words. Flick of heel, tug of sleeve, slight cough. Every gesture became code. Their world became choreography, a dance of presence hidden by omission. Elric. Built small, hidden tools, sleeve knives so thin they slipped between ribs. Boots with detachable soles that left no track. Gloves tipped with poisoned simple pangolin leather that concealed aspirate and bitter dust. He carried a comb that planted seeds of eternally itchy rash in a noble's hair, nothing deadly, but crippling, delaying travel, taking out a campaign. Perhaps most harrowing was the art of the fake confession. A prisoner, clutching the bars, his voice low. "I'm no traitor." Elric, unseen, mixed crushed belladonna into the priest's water. The priest became delirious, mid-sermon. The prisoner confessed but half mad. Guards executed him. Under Carcassonne justice, a false salvation had been served. They never talked about purpose, but each disguise, each toxin, each blade hidden in mundane trade carried the same silent intent. Tilt power back toward justice, not for glory, not for vengeance, but for balance. Yet deception came at a cost. Elric began to lose himself. The face he saw in mirrors was neither blacksmith's son nor monk. It was a mask. He felt guilt when he smiled at children. He distrusted honest trades, doubting if a candid glance hid threat. Sleep grew shallow. Nights brought nightmares pursuit, in empty corridors, where no door existed, where no escape waited. Lysandra felt it too. Their bond kept them tethered, but only just. They argued once beneath the moon in the hills outside Florence. She accused him of becoming hollow. "You bury your soul deeper each time you vanish," she said, voice cracking. He responded that to expose himself was to die. Neither were wrong. They adapted. They began carrying tokens of truth. A carved wooden dove in his satchel, a single kerchief she allowed to bleach in the sun. Reminders that they once existed outside their masks. That beneath the cloak and poison, they were still souls. Their ultimate test came during an orchestration of Kotach's council. An assembly of nobles, linguists, clergy, and military spies. Elric was to remove the Arch-Chancellor man trafficking children, but the hall was sealed. The council far too secure. They built a plan layered with deception. Lysandra took the role of a towel, boy-washing robes, before the session. Elric became a translator's aide, silent, but seen. Poison dust lined the document pages. When the Chancellor unfolded his decree, he razored his eyes across text and sealed his fate. Within minutes, the Chancellor's face collapsed into his hands. He convulsed. He grabbed at strangers. He choked. The room erupted not in alarm, but chaos. Soldiers herded him outside. They thought he died of an allergic attack. No one suspected a blade or arrow. Only unseen justice. Walking away, Elric and Lysandra held each other in silence. No words, no confession, just awareness that they had succeeded beyond technique. They had rewritten power without assassination. The use of a weapon, when replaced by deception, became ultimate by mastering invisibility. They had embraced the paradox. To change the world, one must first disappear from it. Their legacy would be a question left behind. Who killed the Chancellor? No one, everyone, and as they faded into memory, they understood that sometimes the most powerful agents of change are those who leave no mark. In the subterranean vault beneath the Abbey of St. Juliana, in Bruges, flickering torchlight revealed more than stone walls. It revealed oaths carved deep into a brotherhood's soul. This was the sanctuary of the Veiled Dagger, a secret order, known to only a chosen few across Europe. Here, each member took the vow that forged their bond, that power corrupts. But some corruption must be excised with the quiet precision of steel. Their creed demanded sacrifice, discipline, and an unspoken unity, stronger than blood. Elric and Lysandra stood among the initiates that night, their faces half hidden by hoods, but their eyes fully aware. Ceremonies were exacting, no one was spared the ritual of blood-sworn loyalty. A blade pressed to pulse, the offering of a drop, a solemn recitation of the order's tenets, a memory charter sealed on skin. Those who hesitated heard the silent blades whisper in their minds, and understood what abandonment meant. Brotherhood was not comfort, it was accountability. The veiled dagger's hall was a labyrinth of chambers, the forging room, the meditation chamber, the hall of records, the sparring pits carved into earthen floors. Scrolls bound in soft leather lay under lock and key records of every mission, every agent, every betrayal. The punishment for breaking vows was not jail. It was erasure, your name struck from memory, your tools disposed of with silent ceremony. Elric met their Marek successor, Seer Corwin, battle-worn and scarred, whose glance weighed more than spoken judgments. He introduced Elric and Lysandra as new members, fellow architects of unseen endings. In that moment, they were no longer wanderers. They were part of something larger, an echo of countless shadows aligned against tyranny and corruption. But that unity also birthed fear, fear of betrayal, and of losing oneself in the collective's purpose. Within the Brotherhood, rivalry simmered alongside respect. Other assassins eyed Elric's precision and Lysandra's silent grace as both inspiration and threat. Then came the Crimson Coilen offshoot corrupted by ambition. Its masters whispered chaos, not balance. They sent emissaries into the halls, a veiled dagger, offering fortune and power in exchange for allegiance. Their voices were oily, seductive. They promised glory, but they delivered only ashes. Elric and Lysandra found themselves at the heart of a conspiracy. One night, Corwin summoned them alone beneath the crypt. "The coil has infiltrated," he whispered. "They've taken 2 of our own. They plan to assassinate the Grand Council during our next conclave." Panic was eclipsed by resolve. The conclave was days away, and within those halls rested Europe's fragile justice. If the council fell, the Brotherhood would be compromised, and assassins everywhere would become hunted monsters, not silent guardians. They set a trap, a counter-assassination disguised as ritual. Elric carved secret passages under vaulted ceilings, leading to vantage points predetermined. Lysandra gathered intel on potential targets and false allies. Their bond deepened, tempered by the urgency and proximity of betrayal. They patched old wounds: Elric's guilt over Lucian's death, Lysandra's regret over missions gone wrong, even as they steeled themselves for the violence ahead. On the night of the conclave, shadows multiplied. In the hall, cloaked figures from different countries gathered. At the center, the Grand Council sat around a circular table. Elric and Lysandra positioned themselves at opposite ends, unseen threads between them. Below, hidden blades clicked silently into readiness. Every hush, every breath registered as danger. Then a figure lurched, one of their own, his blade flashing toward Corwin. Elric launched up a secret stare, intercepting with a dagger riposte. Blood oozed. Simultaneously, Lysandra's crossbow unleashed a bolt that clipped the betrayer's shoulder. Chaos erupted. The council screamed. But within seconds, the assault was contained. In the barely lit crypt above, Seer Corwin faced his betrayers. The Crimson Coil's men lay dead, or dying, by the time morning light seeped through cracks. Silence followed. The Brotherhood convened to judge not the assassins, but their traitors. Verdict: erasure. The conspirators were bound and cast into the catacombs, never seen again. Elric and Lysandra listened to the echoes of their own moral cost. To protect balance, they had shed blood from their own order. To purge corruption, they had embraced corrosion within themselves. In the days that followed, Elric wandered through Bruges' rain-slick streets, asking himself, what defines a brotherhood when its guardians bear silence and treachery in equal measure? Lysandra joined him in that wandering, sharing stories of childhood innocence lost, of betrayal and loyalty in the fragile line between them. They returned to the abbey together, making small changes, stricter vetting, more intimate ceremonies. A fresh batch of recruits took the vow. Among them were refugees, scholars, farmers. Elric and Lysandra saw potential in their wide eyes, idealism, tempered by pragmatism, but they also understood the cost of secrecy. The deeper their orders sank beneath ceremonies and missions, the more they risked losing their own humanity to ritual. They established reckoning nights, evenings when senior members would tell stories not of kills, but of regrets. Each voice echoed through the hall, reminding them that behind every blade lay a soul. Those stories were sometimes pitiful, sometimes brutal, but always necessary. As seasons changed, a new mission arrived: purge a cult of religious fanatics in Krakow, planning to assassinate a rival sect. The mission was violent, painstakingly planned across weeks. Lysandra used her disguise training to infiltrate the cult's inner circle. Elric forged weapons and prepared traps, but the night before departure, Elric asked Lysandra to stay. He would go alone. She refused. Their unity, born in blood and shadow, remained unbreakable in the crypt's silent passage. As Elric looked down at Lysandra's determined face, he understood. Brotherhood was not only about order, it was about trust. Trust that even in darkness, someone watches your back. Trust that even when order bends, you still remember why you vowed, and for whom the mission in Krakow succeeded, though the price was heavy. They rescued kidnapped innocents, but lost two close allies. The Brotherhood mourned, but honored the dead in ritual song, an echo of remembrance rising through the stone. Elric traced the carved names, each etching a commitment to never forget. Returning to Bruges, he sat in the Hall of Records, leafing through ledgers of every mission. He realized that after so many veils, so many silences, he and Lysandra had become the conscience of an order built on concealment. They had to ensure that shadow never swallowed soul. They began drafting guidelines for transparent missions, sobering the Brotherhood's purpose. It was not revenge. It was responsibility. Elric and Lysandra's influence shifted the veiled dagger's path. They turned it from a silent weapon to a measured balance, an order that killed only when mercy failed, and then only with purpose. Their legacy would be in architects of change, not agents of death. And so, in that echoing dark beneath St. Juliana, a new whisper spread, not of fear, but of hope. A hope fashioned from blade and vow, steel and conscience, isolation and unity. The veiled dagger had become more than a brotherhood. Under Elric and Lysandra, it had become a reflection of humanity in the heart of darkness. Long before Elric ever held Widow's Fang, or stood alongside Lysandra under Bruges Abbey, history had already recorded moments when one strike altered nations. Medieval Europe was littered with echoes of those final blows, moments when a single blade, a tipped bolt, or a hushed poison changed the course of kingdoms. It was into this lineage of legacies that Elric would etch his final mark. He listened to Marek's stories in the twilight hall of the Brotherhood. Tales of Thomas Becket, the martyred Archbishop of Canterbury, slain in a cathedral's hush by knights who believed they carried God's will. Of Philip of Swabia, stabbed at a riverside feast, betrayal hidden in the wineglass that never left his lips. And of William the Silent, shot by a lone gunman on his own castle ramparts. These were not mere assassinations, they were seismic ruptures in power, faith, and history. Elric understood two truths from those legends. The time for steel must be precise when world and weapon allen, and the cost is never contained. Killing a tyrant might birth freedom, but it always bleeds beyond the target. His final mission emerged, not with glory or vengeance, but with weight. Merrick, his mentor and father figure, had betrayed them. Corrupting secrets of the veiled dagger were sold to the Crimson Coil. Scores of agents had been executed in orchestrated purges. And all the while, Merrick hid behind justifications. Without me, the order shatters. My knowledge protects balance. But balance had been broken. How could one who taught silence justify the noise of betrayal? Elric traveled to a snowbound Bavarian monastery, the hidden refuge where Marek had taken sanctuary. White blanketed woods cradled a structure built for prayer and seclusion, far from blood. Here, Elric confronted him, in the candlelit chapel. Marek knelt in prayer, muttering litanies by oath and fear. Their confrontation needed no blade at first. Elric challenged him. How many died because you feared loss more than loyalty? Marek's voice quivered. Guilt, defiance, love, fear, clashing in his tone. I saved the order. You murdered it, Elric replied. Marek stood, showed no weapon. But in his eyes, Elric saw unmade confessions, a life balanced on silence, twisting into darkness. He said softly, You taught me steel is confession. This is mine, and took Widow's fang from its sheath. Outside, a storm-cloaked vigil. Inside, 2 generations of assassins faced each other, blacksmith and smith, pupil and teacher, echo and precedent. Neither moved until Marek raised his hands. Let this be confession, he whispered. Steel spoke then. A knife flicked, precise Silenta, single drop of blood on ancient pew. Marek fell forward, eyes closed in relief. Elric knelt, closing his mentor's last confession in silence. That death would be recorded, eventually, not as betrayal's retribution alone, but as sacrifice. Marek had shaped steel and secrecy, but now revealed his life through Elric's blade, and Elric accepted the burden justice, not born of hate, but of broken trust. Returning to Bruges, Elric walked beneath the abbey's arches, blood still cold in his veins. He left Widow's fang broken at the altar, more testament to vengeance, but to finality. He whispered an unspoken vow, no kill beyond purpose, no silence without testament. However, his work was not finished. The Brotherhood's records had to be purged, the Crimson Coil's influence rooted out, and the memory of Merrick honored with truth, not myth. The final mission came quietly, drawing corrupt agents into confession, shadow by shadow. Lysandra stood at his side, silent witness, and spiritual partner in that reckoning. In the aftermath, a new council convened. No ceremony, no grand declaration, but for each fallen victim, each erased record, each hidden tool, there was accountability. RidgedVoices.com, acceptance, mindful remorse. Under torchlight, the Brotherhood swore new tenets. Justice carried measure, confession carried integrity, and even a final strike must echo with responsibility. Elric and Lysandra withdrew thereafter from council. They walked through Bruges as spectators, not leaders. Their eyes were softer, but still sharp. In Lysandra's hands, a new crossbow named Truth's Bolt rested, a tribute to a final lesson. Some arrows must fly unseen, but their purpose must be known. Elric returned again to Carcassonne, seeking solace. He found none. The city's stones remained shaded with power and fear. Yet he walked the walls anyway, quiet, reflective, remembering the infinite journey from modest forge to silent artist. He visited Lucian's grave in York, touching its moss-cold stone, offering a silent promise that the killing had not been in vain. Together, he and Lysandra retreated finally to an unnamed English countryside village. They built a small sink, robes, no blades. The air was green, alive with breeze and grunt of honest labor. Lysandra taught children archery, not to kill, but to connect with breath and aim. Elric taught blacksmithing, not for war, but for horseshoes and plows. Each lesson tied to purpose. In the years that followed, stories trickled outward, of an assassin turned teacher, and a deafening silence that settled over once bloody lands. Some whispers said they went north. Others claimed they crossed the sea. None said they were gone. None would say they were forgotten. As winter closed around them one final time, Elric penned a last confession. Not a journal of kills, but a testament of a life scared by consequences, redeemed by restraint. Lysandra placed a bolt in his hands, simple wooden shaft carved with forgiveness. That bolt lay with him as he passed. No weapon, only symbol, a final strike into mortality's quiet embrace. They left behind their tools, widow's fang, truth's bolt, hidden knives, all arranged in a chapel of memory. Locked beneath stone, accessible only to those who carry the oath. Those who must remember, always, that every kill writes history. Every silent strike demands confession. Elric's final strike was not at another's throat, but at the heart of his own purpose. He severed vengeance, embraced mercy, and left a legacy not of fear, but of balance. When historians looked back on legends, they would find the story of two assassins who pulled back from the abyss and chose light. That choice, that restraint, was the strongest steel they ever forged. He was once known as the Shadow. They feared him in Carcassonne for the certainty he carried on the silence he left behind. She was his equal in haunting precision, her crossbow a whisper before finality. But long after moons had turned, their greatest legacy was not in bodies. Discovered cold in corridors, it was in remembrance. Elric and Lysandra crossed borders into anonymity, withdrawing from the brotherhood of the veiled dagger at its height. They chose exile in an English valley so remote it didn't bear a name on any map. The surrounding hills were silent witnesses to their transformation from agents of balance to guardians of reconciliation. They rebuilt themselves, bit by bit, through quiet actions. Elric reopened his forge not for weapons, but for horseshoes and plowshares. He worked alongside villagers, offering warmth in winter, repairing wheels and iron whips alike. Each strike of hammer on anvil became a song of restoration, a promise that metal need not be bent to destruction. Children gathered by the hearth to hear his tales of forging. They listened wide-eyed, unaware of how many lives he once reshaped with steel. Lysandra found humility in healing. She gathered herbs along fog-heavy mornings and brewed teas that soothed fevers. She tended to wounds after fields and accidents, never revealing that many she healed bore scars from battles she'd once orchestrated. In her own gentleness, she taught patience and that even the deepest wounds could resonate lessons in care. One cold autumn evening, after years of quiet labor, Elric led Lysandra to a small chapel by the river. Candlelight danced on stone walls. He revealed a wooden chest inside, where the widow's fang, truth's bolt, hidden knives, and the crossbow she had named in their first mission. He explained quietly, "These remain, not as trophies, but as reminders. No one must forget what lies within them and what lies beyond." Their legacy took shape in two forms. The physical, that chest placed beneath the altar, with a simple inscription, for balance, for mercy, for memory, and the living, the children they taught, the villagers they saved, and the travelers they welcomed. Stories passed around hearths about a blacksmith whose smile healed more than his hammer, a healer whose hands soothed more than her herbs. They were legends without cloak or dagger, only compassion and steady purpose. Their influence extended. When a lone traveler arrived in, emissary of the Brotherhood, seeking guidance, they asked Elric, "What is the balance we carry now?" He answered by handing the man a bolt and a horseshoe. Forge in flight. Make tools that build. Use weapons only as proof of restraint. Teach our order to kill once and forgive 1,000 times. Lysandra added, "A blade's legacy ends where mercy begins." Under their teaching, the Brotherhood of the Veiled Dagger shifted focus. Less missions, fewer killings. They trained agents in reconstruction, negotiation, and healing. Their symbol changed from a hooded assassin to a hand holding a sword and an olive branch. History would not credit this, But the change took hold. In their final years, Elric and Lysandra traveled quietly to York to leave a carved tribute on Lucian's grave, a simple line, "Brother, my first lesson." 2 Bruges and continental strongholds, through emissaries sharing their vision. Always, they returned to their valley, to the forge, and to the garden where Lysandra raised night-blooming jasmine. One winter dusk, the forge fell silent. Elric's strength waned, the hammer lay cold. Lysandra sat by his side, holding his hand. He whispered, "We did not live in shadow." She whispered back, "We lived in the light we forged." Hours later, he slipped away quietly, without pain. She carved his name beside his weapons in the altered chest. Months later, Lysandra followed his name newly carved on a wooden bolt in her hands. She buried both in the valley chapel beneath a single oak. The villagers spoke of the day the forest went silent, as though 2 spirits had passed at once. The physical legacy remained, Widow's fang and Truth's bolt, symbols of what wasn't, what must not be again. But their true legacy endured, in quiet lives, touched, in hearts taught that steel can build or protect, but should rarely destroy. A child learning archery murmured, "I aim to help." A farmer forging tools whispered, "This iron heals." A hidden agent in Bruges carried oil and scrolls, just in case. The shadows still existed, but their echoes carried mercy. Elric and Lysandra had discovered the ultimate transformation, not from killer to victim, but from destroyer to healer. That the most powerful blade is the one turned inward, dissecting hatred until only understanding remains. Their story became a whisper in European memory. They were never saints. They were not perfect. They were human, flawed, forgiven, and forgiven again. And in their faults, they found purpose. Their legacy holds this truth: tools forged in darkness can build light. Shadows can shelter redemption, and every blade can leave a wound or carve a new path, one of restoration, reconciliation, and memory. That is the weight of the blade. They carried it so others might learn. Strength gains truth when tempered by mercy. In the quiet, after the last shadow has passed and the last blade has been sheathed, we are left not with death, but with something far more enduring, meaning. Elric and Lysandra did not begin as heroes. They were forged in fire and shaped by the executioner's axe that stole his brother, the other molded by tyranny and silence in a distant city. They stepped into darkness not to destroy the world, but to correct it. And yet, along the way, they discovered that vengeance alone is a hollow creed, that even the sharpest edge dulls when it cuts without purpose, that the truest strength is not in how many enemies you defeat, but in how often you choose not to. What they built in silence was not a reign of terror, but a code of life crafted from discipline, humility, and awareness. Whether in marble halls or forest shadows, their actions were deliberate, never careless. Whether they struck with steel, with poison, or with a look that changed the course of power, they did so as guardians of something sacred, balance, and when their missions ended, when they could have ruled from behind veils or basked in whispered fame, they walked away. Not in shame, but in peace. They chose obscurity. They chose stillness. They chose to heal a world they had once bled. Their final years were not filled with trophies or titles, but with the warmth of forge fires, the scent of crushed herbs, the laughter of children learning to aim a bow not to kill, but to focus. The same hands that once brought down kings now lifted plows and stitched wounds. They reminded us that no one is too far gone to return to grace, that redemption is not earned in grand gestures, but in quiet, consistent acts of good. That's the power of their story. It isn't just history. It's a mirror. Because each of us carries shadows. Each of us has moments where we want to lash out, to take, to hurt, to protect what we think is ours. But Elric and Lysandra's legacy shows us another way, to pause, to breathe, to ask, what is the cost? And more importantly, Who do I become if I choose this path? In a world that often celebrates loudness, speed, and spectacle, their story invites us to embrace the opposite. Precision over chaos, mercy over dominance, and silence not as weakness, but as wisdom. Tonight, as you drift toward sleep, carry this with you. The most legendary assassins of their time chose peace. They turned their backs on violence when they had every reason to continue. They became legends not for what they destroyed, but for what they protected. And maybe that's the greatest weapon of all. The ability to walk away, the courage to heal, the strength to build something better. So if this story touched something deep within you, if it whispered to your own hidden battles, your own search for meaning, don't let it fade. Subscribe to this channel. Stay with us. There are more stories, waiting tales of history's quiet warriors, of forgotten heroes, of legacies built not in war, but in stillness. And as you close your eyes, remember, you don't need a blade to carve your legacy. You only need intent and heart and the courage to walk the harder path. Good night, traveler. The shadows are quiet now, and somewhere, in a quiet forge or a hidden garden, Elric and Lysandra smile not as killers, but as reminders that every story, no matter how dark, can end in light.